My name is Richie Jones with LordsofConsciousness.com. What's going on, LOC community? Anybody who really knows me and understands me understands what a huge fan I am of both Graham Hancock and David Wilcock. These gentlemen have changed my world in many ways. I started reading Graham in the probably mid-2000s with Fingerprints of the Gods, of course. That was a huge game changer for me and really opened my mind to a different world and a different narrative than we have been told through our history books and through media and every other mainstream source. David Wilcock I got into probably around 3 years ago. I read The Synchronicity Key, and it is just an outstanding book for anybody that's never read it, and anybody who is wanting to learn more about the cycles that this world goes through, from everything political to war to just everything. Everything is cyclical. There is no coincidence in anything, and that book really points out these synchronicities and kind of helps us to see what's coming in the future as well. One of those things that they talk about is called the Procession of the Equinox, and that is where the Earth travels in a certain motion throughout the universe. And the motion that we're going into right now is coming out of the Dark Ages, supposedly. So everybody talks about the Mayans and the end of the world, and it's not the end of the world. It is the apocalypse, which is the lifting of the veil, showing the truth. Through the internet, there are no secrets anymore. It's becoming harder and harder to not speak the truth and to get away with the things that people have tried to get through in the past. In this video, you will get to hear from David Wilcock and Goode at Contact in the Desert 2016, as Corey describes the secret space program and everything that's going on behind closed doors and where all this money is going. And it's not going into our infrastructure, that's for sure. It's going into these black ops, this black budget that the government calls it, and we are capable of so much more than what we know. And I believe the more people that hear this information, the better we can be as a species to move forward, lift the veil, and just be honest with each other again. Graham Hancock is going to describe plant medicines, and I am a huge advocate for plant medicine. Anybody that has an issue with it, I believe, has an issue with God, because they are God-made creations, and God doesn't create something for no reason. Everything has a purpose. Everything has a meaning behind it as to why it was put here. And these medicines are for us to utilize to help us, to prevent us from making the same mistakes we've made for thousands of years, and to move forward as a species, and to really move forward into the heart space and come from a place of love instead of a place of greed. So I really hope that you guys enjoy the video. I really enjoyed my time at Contact in the Desert. For anybody that wasn't there, I would highly suggest that next year, make the trip. It's definitely worth the time, worth the money. Just an amazing bunch of souls talking about truth and talking about bettering us as mankind and taking us into this new millennium and this new paradigm. So I hope everyone enjoys the video. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and much love to everyone. Thank you.
What is the secret space program? Could you just tell people a little bit what's What did you do? For people who don't already know, what did you do?
Well, the secret space program is, there are a number of programs that are unacknowledged, secret access programs that are highly compartmentalized. Very few of the people know what the other compartments are doing, and they are breaking out.
Let me get behind you, just in case that's doing it.
And they have been using reverse engineered technology for at least 70 years.
Okay. So, what we're going to talk about today is how incredibly vast this world that Corey lived in actually is. Now, up until recently, we had trouble because I was giving the testimony of multiple insiders who are not willing to come forward. We did with Project Camelot have Henry Deacon come forward. He did that in Switzerland. I was on stage with him when that happened. And he was claiming to have actually worked on a base on Mars. And I spent about 80 to 90 hours talking to him on the phone. Never got anything but confirmation after confirmation from what others had already told me. So you have to understand that for people living in Melanesia, for people living in this little island chain that you actually got to see before my slides died, I think the laptop actually overheated. Because it's very hot today, obviously it's over 100 degrees. So those people in those islands think that's all there is. They think that their islands are the world. We think that we are the whole world. So the idea of actually having a massive industrial infrastructure built out on Mars already, it's jointly run between Earth humans and a variety of extraterrestrials, that seems beyond imagination. But yet, as ridiculous as this may seem to the skeptic, we now have a guy who's coming forward like Henry Deacon did. Henry Deacon, we've tried to get him to come forward again. He doesn't want to anymore. He's totally gone into seclusion. He's never made any money off of this. He's had death threats. Okay, that's just like your standard kind of street cred if you're going to be an insider. You don't make any money and they want to kill you. But now we have Corey who's come forward and he's given us a remarkable amount of testimony about what's really going on here. So this whole secret space program idea is very relevant to today. And here's a really important point. There is a junction between what we think of as the military-industrial complex, the so-called New World Order or Illuminati, and the space program. What's actually going on is that this secret space program originated out of Nazi Germany. So they were the first ones to have the technology to fly off into space. And they did this through a collaborative effort with a reptilian humanoid species called the Draco. So we've heard about this from other insiders before, but what Corey has done is to give us the access to artists and his testimony so we can actually get illustrations of what these guys look like. Very much more detail from Corey than I've ever had from anyone else, but we had all these people telling us this stuff. So the next part of the story that I think is really important is what is the agenda of the space program? You've seen so many of these movies, they're just remaking Independence Day again. What do these movies always tell you is about to happen? Extraterrestrial movies. Alien invasion, right? So I want to be really clear on something. Up until this alliance formed in the space program, the people that are running the space program are really not nice. And they are essentially what you could call the Illuminati, but in the defense contractor / corporate version of that. They did want to use these assets that they've built, which include vast amounts of craft, clones that look like extraterrestrials but can be programmed to do what you want them to do, and they were going to invade our planet. And they were going to use that as a casus belli to create their goal, which is depopulation. They want to drastically reduce the number of people on Earth. So all of this dark and weird and crazy stuff that we've heard about on the fringes of the internet is very much a part of what was going on in the space program. Up until an alliance started to form. So Corey, could you, if you want to, tell us a little bit about what is the Alliance? How did this very negative situation start to turn around? Yeah.
The SSP Alliance is made of a group of people that have broken away from the other secret space programs. And they have loosely come together to form an alliance. And they don't typically get along with each other all that well, but it's kind of a forced alliance. And their goal is to bring about full disclosure and bring all of the technologies to all of humanity at the same time. But this has been, there has been some setbacks, of course, that we've talked about with the Earth Alliance negotiating, wanting a protracted disclosure. But from what we've been hearing, that's not going to be possible. There's too much information out there.
And that's really good news, because if any of you were at the Conscious Life Expo, we created a shockwave in announcing that there was this effort being made by the cabal to do a partial disclosure where they take 100 years to tell us the truth. I don't want to wait that long. I don't know about you, but I don't feel like waiting 100 years. So instead, what we're doing is we're pushing for full disclosure. Now, the technologies that are going to come your way will completely change your life in the most vast, incredible ways you can imagine. We're going to have materializers that can print food and anything that you want, and it's like the best meal you've ever had in your life. Well, the ones that you had were not, right? Except for the pot roast, I guess, right? That's the new joke. He lived on a ship and worked in this cigar-shaped craft and part of a faction of the space program called Solar Warden. And he has had, I just want to point this out to you, I do my due diligence. I'm not ever going to promote somebody if I don't think he's 100% true. So there's people out there saying they're the real thing. You're never going to hear me talking about them. I will only promote somebody who validates hundreds of other things I've heard from others that was never put on public record. So we're putting out all this stuff now that has never been heard before, and there's still new developments that are going on. So,
okay, so I'm sitting in the Amazon jungle, in the middle of a clearing. We've set up some benches in the clearing, and I have drunk a powerful visionary brew called ayahuasca. And as I'm sitting there and the ayahuasca begins to work, I go through the nausea and all of that, and I get into a deep altered state of consciousness. Suddenly I become aware of a group of, UFOs right above me, and I see this face, which is very like the face of a typical alien grey, and it's looking down at me from the sky, and I'm filled with terror. With ayahuasca visions, it's better to keep your eyes closed. If what you find is frightening, you can often block it by opening the eyes. So this is what I do. I open my eyes because I get the strong sense that they're going to take me, and I don't want to be taken, and I open my eyes and I say, no! Of course, what I should have done was kept my eyes closed and said, yes! Fear is never going to serve us in these situations. I was in the Amazon because I had become aware of remarkable similarities in art around the world. Going back deep into the human story, way back to the painted caves 40,000 years ago or more, and through the cultures of the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Greeks, coming into the modern age, and then shamanistic cultures all around the world, and there are astonishing similarities in the imagery that is presented, and I wanted to understand that. And then I came across some excellent academic work which had been done by Professor David Lewis Williams at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa, and he really makes an excellent case that the similarities in this art all around the world can be explained if we understand that this is visionary art, that these artists are entering deeply altered trance states. They're then returning to the normal alert problem-solving state, and they're painting what they've seen in their visions. I got to know one of the Amazonian painters. He was an ayahuasca shaman, although eventually he stopped drinking ayahuasca. His name was Pablo Amaringo, great painter. And he painted his ayahuasca visions. And in his paintings, repeatedly, we see images of flying saucers and entities that look a bit like our idea of aliens. So I asked Pablo, why are you painting flying saucers? Is this what are they? What are these things? And he said something very interesting, which I've never since forgotten. He said, I said, are these vehicles for bringing, advanced technological beings here from other planets? He said, no. He said what these are is vehicles for entering and leaving the spirit world. And when a shaman talks of the spirit world, he is just a hair's breadth away from the notion of parallel dimensions or parallel universes. And I wonder if it's not the case that reality in which we are immersed is vastly more complicated and nuanced than we imagine. We have a certain set of senses, our eyes, our ears, we hear, hearing, taste, smell, touch, and so on, the five senses. And we already know that it's a mistake to think that what we can see with our five senses is all of reality. Why do we know that? Because we can get out a microscope and see tiny stuff that we couldn't see with our naked eyes. So the notion that we can't see everything with our senses is a good notion. And the suggestion is that in deeply altered states of consciousness, we alter the receiver wavelength of the brain, and we allow the brain to gain access to other levels of reality that are normally closed off to us. And I have a feeling that that is part of what we are involved in the UFO and alien mystery. Whatever this is, it's something that goes back into the very origins of humanity. It goes back a very long way. Whoever these entities are, they have been with the human race as teachers for countless aeons. I also wrote a book called Supernatural, published in 2005, and the subtitle of that book is Meetings with the Ancient Teachers of Mankind. I think we're jumping too quickly to a materialistic conclusion to assume that those are just high-tech beings a bit like us who've conquered the crossing of interstellar space. In a way, I think that rather minimizes and diminishes the mystery. I think it's much more complicated and much more mysterious than that, and that we are interacting through many layers and many levels with all kinds of entities and intelligences. And maybe intelligence is not fundamentally physical. Maybe consciousness is one of the fundamental forces of the universe, like gravity or electricity. It's there, and maybe it's simply manifesting in physical form. In short, I think we should preserve our sense of mystery. We should open inquiries into human consciousness. Neuroscientists really don't know a lot about consciousness. They can't explain consciousness. We should open inquiries into consciousness, and we should use the shamanistic plants and fungi that have been available to our ancestors for tens of thousands of years as tools to inquire into this mystery of consciousness. In that way, I think we may get close to the answer to what the problem is. Just one last word on this. Rick Strassman at the University of New Mexico, giving dimethyltryptamine, the most powerful hallucinogen known to man, to human volunteers. More than 50% of his volunteers had experiences that were indistinguishable from the experiences of UFO abductees. And here's what a number of them said, without comparing notes. The entities they met in their deeply altered state of consciousness said this to them. They said, "We're so glad you've discovered this technology. Now we can communicate with you much more easily." Think about it.
Yeah, David's absolutely correct. There's this phenomenon called procession, the equinox. A really easy way to understand what that is the Earth has three motions. It spins on its axis, rotation, and so when you see the stars go around us, it's not because the stars are going around us, it's just because the Earth is spinning. And the Earth's second motion, according to Copernicus, is the Earth's revolution around the sun, goes at a slight angle. And of course, you see a different constellation of the 12 zodiacal constellations overhead roughly once a month. And it's not because they're moving, but it's because we're going around the sun looking at a different portion of space as we do so. And both of these cycles have a dramatic effect on Earth. The first one, the Earth's rotation, causes a cycle of night and day, and our bodies are so well adapted to this waxing and waning light that we actually change consciousness, which is pretty remarkable. We go from a waking state where we are now to a subconscious state when we sleep. It's so remarkable, but it happens so often we don't think too much about it. And then the second motion also has a rather remarkable effect on Earth, and that is it creates the seasons, of course, and it causes billions of animal forms to migrate or spawn or hibernate or come out of hibernation, depending on which part of the cycle you're on. And it causes trillions of life forms to, just spring out of the ground in the spring and give their fruit and then decay, seemingly die again, and somehow live again with the next cycle. So there's no question that celestial motions cause big changes on Earth. It's just we're so used to it, we don't think about it much. And as David mentioned, there's a lot of scholarly work that suggests there is a third motion, the Procession, the Equinox. And as you mentioned, Giorgio de Santillana, Hertha von Deschen in Hamlet's Mill spoke of over 30 ancient cultures that had the same myth, that history or consciousness is cyclical. And a long, long time ago, there was a golden age, and then things declined into a dark age, and that we would ascend once again. And because 30 different ancient cultures had the same myth, and some of them didn't know each other, the Egyptians called the high time Zep Tepi, the Greeks called it this cycle the Great Year and broke it into the Iron, Bronze, Silver, and Golden Age. The Indians called it the Yuga cycle, broke it into the Kali, Dwapara, Treta, and Satya Yugas. They had different names for it, but because there were so many cultures all talking about the same thing, it's sort of suspicious. There might be some truth to it. Maybe there is a cycle that causes changes here on Earth, but it's on such a grand scale that we hardly notice it. And indeed, the scale of roughly 24,000, 25,000 years is so long that we are like the mayfly. That's that fly that just has the big clear wings. It just lives for one day a year. And so if it happens to be born on a sort of a gray and gloomy day and with no wind, things aren't so great. Versus if it's born on a day when it's sunny and it can just glide on the wind, it probably thinks things are pretty cool. And so we have a fairly limited view of history, and we tend to believe that whatever came before us must be more primitive, even though we do hear myth and folklore about this long lost higher age.